بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ومن يهاجر في سبيل الله يجد في الأرض مراغما كثيرا وسعة ومن يخرج من بيته مهاجرا إلى الله ورسوله ثم يدركه الموت فقد وقع أجره على الله وكان الله غفورا رحيما.
At first light, the bodies of the children who died in the night are brought down from the mountain at Chikoja. Hundreds have been killed by cold, hunger, and diseases caused by the filth around them, despite the relief effort. Some are taken to this makeshift mortuary in the local mosque. A family who could find no other shelter sleeps a few feet from the bodies. Outside, the dead are left by their relatives. They have no hope of giving their children and grandchildren a decent funeral, so they deposit them at the local mosque and hope that someone else will. Chikoja is a desperate place, but it's one of the more accessible camps. In the mornings, refugees wait for doctors and food to arrive. They beg Turkish soldiers to let them take the sickest people down to the village. The soldiers, though, believe some refugees are faking illness to get off the mountain and are hard to persuade. Some people are desperate enough to try to break through the cordon. The young Turkish conscripts are under orders to stop them. The most remote sites have barely been touched by the rescue operation. The few lorries that get through to a Zumlo camp high in the mountains are besieged by refugees. Only the young and the efficient process which prevents starvation at a price. The ridge where the parachutes landed is in Iraqi territory. They say that 10 people were killed yesterday trying to get packages which had landed in minefields. Through a tannoy, Turkish soldiers told the refugees to stay out of the minefields. They ignored the warnings. There's no real medical care at Zumlo, only a few handfuls of drugs for perhaps 10,000 people. Nothing can be done for the dying babies and their frantic parents. This woman said she blamed herself. The babies die from gastroenteritis and pneumonia, according to the only doctor, a refugee, who stays at the camp, and the medical student who helps him. They expect cholera next.
Yes, yes. It will appear. It will appear. Yes, it will appear.
There's no hospital, only a filthy tent. People without hope, whose strength is gone, lie next to piles of human excrement and wait for death.
I think you will face our fate. We will die one after the other. We've escaped from Saddam Hussein and his death, and we are facing another death here.
What will you do, though? Would you ever go back to Iraq?
I prefer to go my home because we will not want to live beggars or parasite on others, but we want to live with guarantee. We want guarantee from United Nations, from Europe and everything, because we do not trust Saddam Hussein.
Isha Namat is 22. She lies in a hut with her 6 surviving children. She hasn't been able to stand since she gave birth to twin boys 10 days ago. She has no medicine and no doctor, but the hut has electricity. There's a television. and they watch the world they think has abandoned them. In the cemetery, her father is digging a grave for one of Isha Namat's babies. He buried the other yesterday. The old man hadn't heard about international promises of aid. He said they'd all been left to die. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News, at Umlozo camp on the Turkey-Iraq border.
After a cold, wet, sleepless night at the side of a stony mountain road, a mother tries to toast her baby. She's been walking for more than a week, and she's afraid her child will die before she reaches warmth and shelter. How far that is, how many more days they'll have to travel, none of these people know. They just keep going as best and as quickly as they can. The weather up here changes from minute to minute. Constant spring showers mean that clothes and blankets won't dry out before nightfall, and it's at night that so many have died. The road from Kurdish Iraq to Kurdish Iran twists and turns through the mountains at 6,000 feet above sea level. It's as though hundreds of thousands of people were inching their way along a ledge, with a cliff face on one side and a sheer drop on the other. And getting food and blankets to those in the queue is a logistical nightmare. There is barely room on the road for a relief vehicle to pass. So, to extend the relief effort to where the need is greater, the Iranian Air Force is now using Chinook helicopters. But in this region, bad weather has cut planned flights by more than half. And deliveries, averaging 30 tons a day, here of bread and rice, simply don't do more than scratch the surface of the need. This flight ended at the military post on the border with Iran. Thousands are forced to wait here because congestion has blocked the road into Iran. According to the military governor of this region, 1 million Kurds have already crossed into Iran, and another 500,000 are clogging the roads behind me. That queue, we're told, stretches for 40 miles. This is a whole people on the move. Nobody knows the extent of this human tragedy. All one can say is that what these people are suffering, the Kurds, is infinitely greater than what happened to the Kuwaitis.
Mr. George Bush is responsible for all this. He could destroy Saddam and his army, but he don't try. All this because he don't want Kurdish and Shia to be leader in Iraq, to run Iraq. Why did he do that? He could destroy the army. We could live in peace. The war is finished. He destroyed Kuwait. Kuwait is 1 million. 1 million. He do this all war for 1 million. We are
20,000 are on this mountainside alone. The children are in most danger from the bitter cold and lack of food. Families here feel completely abandoned, in danger of starving to death. Their mothers scavenge for water, which is in such short supply, people are forced to suck the snow to stay alive. The Kurdish refugees are being literally pushed back towards Iraq by Turkish soldiers. Any Kurds who try to get past the soldiers are hunted down. This man was caught and knocked unconscious. Every day, more illness, more disease. This man lost his left arm because of gangrene. Now part of his right arm has also been amputated. This woman is covered in napalm burns, attacked by the Iraqis as she fled. Kurdish doctors say they must have medicines or they won't survive.
All of us will die. Even doctor will die.
The dead remain uncounted. Every morning they carry out those who didn't make it through the night. This 80-year-old man walked for 9 days with no food. He made it to the border only to die of exhaustion. His heartbroken son stayed with him until the end.
If food is not brought in here in a matter of days, food and tents and blankets are the priority, particularly tents and blankets. If that doesn't arrive within a matter of days, now you're going to have deaths in the thousands, I believe.
2 RAF Hercules planes tried to deliver food and medicines today, but severe weather forced them to turn back to their base in southern Turkey. They'll try again tomorrow. When food and blankets do get through, there's anarchy. The gross lack of organisation means so much so desperately needed is being wasted. It's almost beyond belief, and it's almost too late to put a halt to this appalling human catastrophe. Benno Glaser, News at 10, Eastern Turkey.
Exodus, the hemorrhaging of Iraq, a human tragedy on a monstrous scale. All these things have already been said, and yet still they do not adequately describe what is happening here, 10,000 feet up above the snow line, where the two hostile countries meet. But what more can you say to describe these hundreds of miles, families all, who do not believe they brought Saddam Hussein's vengeance on themselves and continue to bring with them a sense of betrayal? But they have not made it to the safe side yet, and possibly many never will. A loudspeaker and gunfire from the Turkish side warns them to stay where they are, that they risk being shot at if they stampede across. Such is the welcome, such is the defiance. The Turkish soldiers hold a thin blue line, a fragile cordon that would not hold if these thousands decided enough was enough. The reason why an army cameraman shot this video was to give the Turkish military and civil authorities some idea of the scale of the problem they are being asked to cope with on their own. Because, and be in no doubt, scenes like this are not confined to this one area. These people are determined to get in whatever the dangers. Numbed by the risk, they travel through any pass, through any minefield along this 200-mile border, unconcerned about the dangers ahead, only looking back at what they are running away from. The Turkish army is containing them in no man's land because the government is frightened of letting them even a few yards into Turkey, fearful that the temporary refugee camps will become a permanent problem.
We come for you nothing.
But the general finally agrees, and the sick and their carriers are beckoned up across the valley, across no man's land, into Turkey. Babies suffering from lack of milk, children gangrenous from frostbite, and those who could not manage those final few yards of their long journey and died on the slope. Talk of a sanctuary for the Kurds in northern Iraq, and that would mean sending them back across the mountains they've just crossed. So who will tell them, and how will they respond? And will the international guarantees be enough to persuade them to return to the country they now fear more than this existence and the miserable prospects ahead? Michael Nicholson, News at 10.
20 miles inside Iraq, this is their exclusive story.
People who still believed they were heading for a better place, people who were weak, some of them barely able to walk, but still unwilling to offload the few possessions they managed to escape with. It may be a majestic setting, yet it was hard to conceive how the refugees managed to survive with nighttime about to fall and temperatures diving even lower.
We spent our first night just as the refugees did, high in the mountains in this small settlement. We slept under plastic sheeting, and without the specialist sleeping bags, conditions would have been excruciating. The people say what they really need is practical aid and the ability to come down from these mountains to lower, warmer ground. So far, the only aid that's arrived here are these MREs, meals ready to eat, dropped from the sky by American C-130s. In this pack, corned beef. In this pack, chocolate. But what the people really need is help, practical help, now.
The freezing morning saw the departure of several families heading on for Chukurja, many of the children so tired and so cold they couldn't face another day of walking. During the night, a baby had been born a few yards away from where we had slept. Its parents had given no thought to giving their first son a name. They were too worried about whether they'd survive as a family. But while the day brought new life, there was also the sound of death in the air. In this tent, the father of 12 children had just died. He was 44 years old. He died from hypothermia after falling sick on a long walk to get this far. A doctor could have saved him. His family couldn't. Half an hour later, 2 young men set out to bury their father. Much has now been seen of the refugees' plight. This may seem shocking, but refugees walk on regardless. We moved on again, and another stream of people on the tracks. Some had left Iraq with nothing apart from what they stood up in. Shoes either wore out earlier in the walk or simply got stuck in the mud. Many carried on barefoot. Our first sight of the transit camp from which they were heading was the haze of wood smoke hanging above the valley. We reached this camp in the night, and the people were all talking about leaving the next day because conditions were too bad. One man, a secondary school teacher, had been told by the Turks it would take 2 to 3 hours to get to Shukurja from here. It would, in fact, take his family at least 2 to 3 days. We had to tell them the truth, that they were better off staying here in better conditions until the weather cleared. And even if they did make the walk, the camp at Shukurja had less shelter than this one.
الجوف الطارق.
Ningú no sap quants refugiats hi han instal·lats al camp d'Izikberen, a les muntanyes que separen Turquia de l'Iraq. Es calcula que hi ha entre 100.000 i 200.000 persones, però de moment al camp no hi ha cap organisme ni local ni internacional que controli o ajudi als refugiats. Amb mantes i plàstics han de fer front a temperatures que a la nit baixen sota zero. La majoria no té més vestits que els que porten a sobre. El poc menjar que es distribueix només arriba a uns quants. La resta s'ha de conformar amb el que troben. Els que aconsegueixen capturar una cabra escapada d'algun ramat es consideren molt afortunats. A la muntanya, situada a uns 2.000 metres d'alçada, l'únic lloc d'on es pot treure aigua és la neu. Per aconseguir-ne una mica, alguns dels refugiats han de caminar fins a 2 hores. La neu és dura com el gel i s'ha de rascar molt per obtenir-ne neu neta que ha de servir per beure. Les dones aprofiten també l'aigua del desglàs per fer la bugada. Ara és el ramadà i l'islam prescriu que durant aquest mes els musulmans han d'anar especialment nets. Una prescripció difícil de mantenir quan no es té sabó i s'ha de rentar amb aigua gelada i terrosa. El consum d'aigua de neu provoca còlics que en el cas dels nens i els vells acostumen a ser fatals. Entre 50 i 60 persones moren diàriament en aquest camp, segons els militars que vigilen els refugiats. Està malalt. No tinc llet. I té gana. No tenim res. Té gana i es morirà. No tinc llet. No tinc res. La tensió és cada cop més forta, perquè els refugiats no volen tornar a dalt de les muntanyes. Després dels crits i les empentes, se senten els primers trets. Un grup de refugiats comença a tirar pedres contra els soldats. Llavors, els militars fan foc contra la gent. La gent deia que els soldats havien matat a una nena, però no ho van poder comprovar perquè els militars ens ho van impedir.